Well, hello, thank you for joining me today again on the Church History Trail. And I thought I would take you for another dander through my library. And we're at another wee bookcase that I have. And I'm going to show you some books. And the first book up is actually by my old pastor, who is Pastor Norman Christie. Norman wrote this book, Born to Live, the Story. And that's his story, his life story. And there's Norman at the back, as you can see. Try and get it where the light's not shining on it. And that's Pastor Norman. And so Pastor Norman was my pastor for a good many years. And he has another wee book as well. And this one is on bereavement. A life lived with love. And that's a pastor's journey through bereavement. And that's been a good help, that book, to those who have lost their spouse. And another wee book then here is actually from another friend of mine, Tom McCann. And Tom takes part in the Zoom meeting that I take part in online. And this is a transforming presence, realising God's ability within you. And there's Brother Tom there, Tom McCann. And Tom was actually originally born actually in Rio Grande do Sul, and which is in the southern state of Brazil, the most southern state of Brazil, as you can see from his book. And so that's Tom. And there's a wee series here that I have, and this series is meant to be for teenagers, but to be honest with you, it's a blessing to adults as well, because there's great teaching in it, even though it is only meant to be for teenagers. And so I'll show you a few of these here. It's actually the Trailblazers, and there's loads of these wee books, so there is. And this one here is John Chrysostom, the preacher in the Emperor's Court. Of course, he was so elegant in his preaching that he was known as Golden Mouth, the Golden Mouth Chrysostom. And he was an early leader in the church, so he was. And these wee books, like, there's loads of them. And here's one on Tyndale. William Tyndale, The Smuggler's Flame. Of course, William Tyndale left England and went to the continent to print Bibles, and then he smuggled them back into England, and he translated Erasmus's Greek New Testament into the English language in 1525 and 1526. But he ended up being caught by the authorities, and he then was captured. He was imprisoned in Vilvoord prison for our castle for a wee while, and then he was executed. He was burnt at the stake in 1536. Although he was strangled, he was offered, because he was a scholar, he was offered if he wanted to be strangled before he was burnt, which is not much of an option. You either be burnt or be strangled. So they strangled him, and then they burnt him at the stake. And let's see who else we've got here. There's different ones there. Let me see. There's Mary of Orange. That was William III's wife. That's a wee book on her. And who else have we got here? Let me see. There's Moody, D.L. Moody, the evangelist, one devoted man, and certainly Moody was devoted to the Lord. There's no doubt about it. There's Bonhoeffer. He was part of the German resistance, and they executed him. He took part in the plot to blow up Hitler, and they executed him. He took part in the plot to assassinate Hitler, and they executed him, the Nazis. You'll know this man if you're from Northern Ireland, C.S. Lewis, and even if you're not, because he's well known, and that's C.S. Lewis. And that was actually written by Derek Bingham. And I used to go to Tuesday night at the Crescent in Belfast, and it was Derek Bingham who used to preach every Tuesday. Well, it wasn't every Tuesday night, but it was known as Tuesday night at the Crescent, and I don't think it was every Tuesday night, but it was Derek Bingham that used to do the preaching, and they were packed. Those meetings were absolutely packed back in the day. And then the last one is Joni. This is Joni Erickson, and Joni Erickson Tada, of course, and she was paralysed after a swimming accident. And the Lord has done a mighty work in Joni's life, and she's touched a lot of people and reached a lot of people. So that's Joni, and better hurry up because time's flying on here. I want to mention these wee books to you too. At least some of them. These are only a pound. These wee books here, and but they're fantastic wee books. There's the first one. That's Torah, How to Study the Bible, and this here is also a brilliant wee book here on Torah, How to Pray. These are great wee books. They're not only good for the seasoned believer, but they're also good even for the new Christian. They're fantastic. I'm gonna see what else we've got here. There's one there. I was a wee bit disappointed with this one. Andrew Murray, The Full Blessing of Pentecost, Power from on High, because I was looking forward to getting into this book, and I have read this book, but it was a bit disappointing because it didn't seem to be the full blessing of Pentecost. It seemed to be the partial blessing, to be honest with you, because he seemed to want the polish without the power, you know. And I think it's better to have the polish and the power together. But there you are. So a wee bit disappointed with Andrew on that now, I have to say. And then who else have we got? There's Oswald Chambers, and that's the revival we need, and we certainly need a revival in these days, don't we? Who else have we got there? Let me see. There's E.M. Bounds, Power Through Prayer, a stirring exhortation to pray. Definitely, if there's no prayer, there's no power. And then the last one in this wee series is Davy Wilkerson, Hallowed Be Thy Names. That's the revelation of God through his names. And you'll have heard of David Wilkerson if you know of Teen Challenge, because he's the founder of Teen Challenge, and the Teen Challenge is still going today, and even is over here in Northern Ireland. In fact, my friend is part of it, part of the outreach. And David done a fantastic work with drug addicts and prostitutes and the teenagers in America. Fantastic work. And then there's Alexander Tail. Give Alex a wee mention. He's deceased now, but he was an evangelist with the Elam, and that's Alexander T. I can remember Alexander T. coming to Lisburn, Elam, to have a mission. In that book there, he's got us on the Amazing Cross. And then there's a couple of wee commentaries there. One is Mark. That's the Gospel of Mark by Cole. And the other one, I'll give this guy a mention. This is Romans, commentary on Romans, but it's by F.F. Bruce. And F.F. Bruce was actually a brethren. He was a brethren man, but unlike most brethren, he believed in he was a post-tribulationist. He wasn't a pre-tribulationist, Bruce. And so he believed in the post-tribulation rapture rather than the pre-tribulation rapture, which most brethren that I know certainly would believe in the pre, you know. And then this is my whole series here on Spurgeon. Well, it's not my whole series of other ones, but this is a good part of it. And there's wee Spurgeon. That's the unforgettable Spurgeon. That is absolutely true. He's unforgettable. The Lord done a mighty work through him. And that's reflections on his life and writings. And there's a wee picture biography of Spurgeon. So I'll maybe show you some of those wee pictures, because Spurgeon was a great man of God. I'll just flick through this very, very quickly. And that's the, I think that's his funeral, his coffin. And I'll just flick through these very quickly. Mr. Moody at 27, D.L. Moody at 27, Sunday school worker. And there's the Metropolitan Tabernacle, Spurgeon's Church. Look at the crowd there, isn't that fantastic? Look at that. Boy, we need those days again, don't we? And so I'll just give a quick flick through here to let you see this if I can. I think that's Spurgeon's mother and father there, as you can see. And I think that's the father again there. Is it? Maybe it's not. Oh yes, it is. The Reverend John Spurgeon, father of George Haddon, from the last photograph taken of the Venerable Minister. There he is. That's Spurgeon's daddy. There you go. And there you are. So that's Spurgeon. And these wee books are good to have, you know. Now, so they're all Spurgeon there. And let me see who's up next. This series here is very good. It's Victor Pierce. It's Science. It's Evidence for Truth. And it's a 4-volume series. Science, Archaeology, Prophecy, and Miracles and Angels. And then the last wee booklet here is the Jacobite Rebellion, 1745 to 1746. And there's been a few Jacobite rebellions throughout the years, so there has. So there you are. And that's Culloden. That bottle there, that's Culloden. And then this wee book here is Robert Murray McCheyne. And that's his church. He was an evangelist, a fantastic. I think he was only for 7 years, and then he died young. But in those 7 years, my goodness, he does more than most of us do in a lifetime, you know. And so that's his church. I'll show you a wee photo of him. If you don't know what Robert Murray McCheyne looks like, that's what he looks like. You'll hear preachers talking about Robert Murray McCheyne, the Scottish evangelist. Well, that's him there. And that's Sermons of Robert Murray McCheyne. And there's his church. A wee drawing of his church. And let me see who else we've got. Oh yes, this is Scroggie. This is Scroggie. That's William Graham Scroggie. The Love Life, 1 Corinthians 13. The Love Chapter. And if you remember, I talked a wee bit about Scroggie in another wee video. And Scroggie, if you remember, he wrote the other book that I showed you, which was Method in Prayer in 1916. And Scroggie was actually born in 1877. He died in 1958. But after pastorates in England, Scotland, New Zealand, Australia, Tasmania, the United States, Canada, so he got about. He became the pastor of the famous Spurgeon Metropolitan Tabernacle in London. So he actually pastored in Spurgeon's old tabernacle. And during World War II, his home was actually bombed on 3 occasions. Scroggie's home and his historic church building was destroyed during an air raid. And so that's Scroggie. And I have him up, his photo up in another wee video where I mentioned that his other book, The Method in Prayer. And so that's Scroggie. And then this man here is Campbell Morgan. George Campbell Morgan. And that's his wee book there, Basic Principles of the Christian Life. And again, he was a fantastic servant of God as well. And he was the minister of the famous Westminster Chapel from 1904 to 1917 and from 1933 to 1943 in London. And his successor was the famous Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones. And Campbell had actually mentored Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones from 1939 in the chapel, in the Westminster Chapel. Of course, it was a congregational church. Now, for most of Morgan's life, Campbell Morgan's life, he actually taught the dispensational view of Israel and the church, Israel and the Jews. But towards the end of his life, he moved away from dispensationalism to covenant theology. So basically, he treated Israel in a spiritual sense. So instead of believing that that Israel would be restored as a nation and as a people of God, he spiritualized it for Israel then to be the church. And so he actually turned to replacement theology, covenant theology, where he believed then that the church is now Israel. And here's what he wrote in a letter in 1943. And this letter was to the Reverend H.F. Wright in New Brunswick, Victoria. He wrote, "I am quite convinced that all the promises made to Israel are finding and will find their perfect fulfillment in the church. It is true that in time past in my expositions, I give a definite place to Israel in the purposes of God. I have now come to the conviction, as I have just said, that it is the new and spiritual Israel that is intended." So he spiritualized the church to mean Israel. Of course, I wouldn't agree with that view, but Campbell Morgan certainly is a mighty man of God. He was used mightily in his day. But that would go against what Paul said in Romans chapter 11, verse 25. Paul says, "And it's concerning the Lord's return, for I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion, that blindness in part has happened to Israel, but it's only until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in." And the fullness of the Gentiles will have come in whenever Christ returns. So that's Morgan Campbell, and he started out as a dispensationalist, but then he changed to covenant theology. But sure, we'll not hold that against him. So we'll not. And there's another wee book then of Campbell Morgan's. No, sorry, that's the scroggy one. This one here is Campbell Morgan's. And if you can see that there, that's the life of the Christian. And that's Campbell Morgan. And so that's another wee book of his. And then there's another one here as well. This is probably one of his best known ones. The Crisis of the Christ, the 7 greatest events of his life. And that's Campbell Morgan. And so he's a great servant of God. The Lord used him mightily. Now, what else have we got here? There's one there of it's the teaching of Martin Lloyd-Jones, and it's by Michael A. Eaton, and it's actually on baptism with the Spirit. That one's on baptism with the Spirit of Martin Lloyd-Jones, and this here then is my series on Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, which I've got a lot of wee books on him as well. And that's a young Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, as you can see. And that's his evangelistic sermons. And what else have we got? Revival. That's him on revival. And let me see. There's one of, in his later years, Preaching and Preachers, Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones. And that's him in his full regalia. And what else have we got? Let's see. There's the Heart of the Gospel. Again, another wee photo of Martin Lloyd-Jones. And again, he was a great man of God in his day. And it was Campbell Morgan that trained Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones. And let me see, what else have we got here? There's the power The Plight of Man and the Power of God. If you can see that one. And that's there's actually a few photos in this one. So maybe this is Memories of Sandfields. And this is Bethan Lloyd-Jones, which is his daughter, if I remember rightly. Unfortunately, it's coming apart that book a wee bit. So it is, but there's Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones there. Martin in Lakeland on the fishing trip. That's him on a fishing trip. Then there's a billboard for him. Sunday 11 a.m, 7 p.m. Reverend Martin Lloyd-Jones, South Wales. What is that? What's the church, if you can see it? And let's see. Sherborne. That's Sherborne. Sherborne Street, I think it is. But that wee book's coming apart on me. So I better put it back. There you are. That's him and his wife and the wee girl. So some good wee photos in that wee book as well. And let's see what else we had. This is my Puritan stuff as well here. That's more in Lloyd-Jones. And then there's B.B. Warfield again. I showed you him in another book I had of him in another case. That's The Saviour of the World by B.B. Warfield. And this is my Puritan stuff here. That's Thomas Watson, the Old Puritan, A Body of Divinity. And let's see what else we have, if there's any. There's one there. That's Alexander White. And I've been in Alexander White's church, and that's Bunyan characters. Bunyan himself is seen in his Grace Abounding by Alexander White. So there you are. And there's Bunyan himself. That's the man himself. Running the race to heaven. The heavenly footman. That's Bunyan. And Bunyan was persecuted for his faith. He was arrested for preaching because he hadn't a license, and he was put in jail. And he stayed in jail for a good number of years. He's probably best, secondly to the Pilgrim's Progress, he's probably best known for this in sermons. This is Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners. Grace Abounding to the Chief of Sinners by John Bunyan. And so he's probably best known in his sermons anyway for that. And there's that's John Bunyan again, The Riches of John Bunyan. And gives you a wee bit of a flavour for the period with that house, doesn't it? So there you go. That's Packer, I think, this one. Yep, that's J.J. Packer. Among God's Giants. Richard Sibbs, Richard Baxter, and John Owen. And certainly God's Giants of the Faith, weren't they? And then there's a couple here by Edwards. Jonathan Edwards. Jonathan Edwards on Knowing Christ. And then the other one by Edwards is Charity and Its Fruits by Jonathan Edwards. And then there's a wee book there on Heaven by Jonathan Edwards as well. So a few there on Edwards as well. And again, he was mightily used of God in his day. And I better hurry up because time. Oh, here's a wee book here. I want to mention this one. This Daniel. And do you recognise the name there? That's Harold S. Paisley. Now, if anybody that lives in Northern Ireland should know that name, because he was actually the brother of Ian Paisley, the late Ian Paisley. So that's Ian Paisley's brother, Harold, who was also a minister. And there he's there. So if you don't know what Harold Paisley looks like, that's what he looks like. And he was a dispensationalist, where his brother Ian was into covenant theology. But Harold was a dispensationalist. And I'll read a wee bit out to you. It says, Harold S. Paisley was born in 1924 in Lurgan, Northern Ireland. He was a veteran of World War II, where he served in the RAF. In March 1944, He was born again and baptised as a believer shortly thereafter. In May 1945, he went into full-time service for Christ, commended by the grace of God to the great work of preaching the gospel. 20 years of preaching in the United Kingdom has been followed by 45 years of preaching and teaching in the USA and Canada. Wow, what a mighty servant of the Lord. And that's his wee book on Daniel, his commentary. And I've read that the wee commentary on Daniel. It's very, very good. That's Harold Paisley, another great giant of the faith. And then this is the man himself here. This is the Reverend Ian. And this is part of my wee library on Reverend Ian Paisley. And so that's the man himself, the late Ian Paisley. And again, he was a man mightily used by God. The soul of the question and the question of the soul. Only Ian Paisley could come up with a title like that there. And then this is a wee book on Romans. A wee commentary done on Romans. Good wee book. And you've heard of Paul's prison epistles. Well, this was Ian Paisley's prison book because he wrote this while he was in prison. So he did. While he was locked up, he wrote this wee book on Romans, this wee commentary on Romans. So there you are, that's Ian. That's his commentary on Romans. And I've another few books there as well on Ian. As well. And what else have we got here? Here's a wee book here I'm going to mention. This is by Mavis Ross. It's A Century of Grace of Revornant Mission Hall. And I used to be a member of Revornant Mission Hall. And this is a wee book she's done on the history. And you'll see all the people involved. There's Jeffrey Donaldson there, Willie McRae. That's a brethren preacher on the right there, Trevor Hearn, and on the left, Tommy Fraser with the glasses. I helped with a mission with them men. And that was the first two faith mission pilgrims that I remember coming to Revornant Mission Hall. Esther Hewitt, I think, was one, and Rachel, can't remember Rachel's second name. Esther's on the right, Rachel's on the left. And then there's Mr. Porter, that's my dad. Albert Porter. And there's Geordie Bates. That's George Bates, Randallstown evangelist and pastor. Well, a leader in the church. And that's, I think that's Joe Peden you called that man. If I remember rightly, I think it was Joe Peden. There's Wesley Ward with the glasses. That's Wesley there with the glasses there. And that's John. Oh, what was John's second name? He's a minister of the Free P Church, and so is the man on the left. That's the Reverend Martin. And there's wee Jack Hill with the glasses. And he was the superintendent of the mission hall when I was there. And then that's his replacement, Heather Reddick, and she took over from him. But my testimony's in this wee book, and so is my mum and my dad's testimony. And I'm going to show you, I mentioned this in another wee video when I was in the graveyard talking about my dad. And it's a wee letter that my mum got from, there you can see my mum and my dad, and the Albert and his wife Mina, who lived on the Revornant Road for many years. But this was mentioned, it was a wee letter she got by royalty. And you can see my dad preaching there in the open air in Lisburn. But this is the wee letter she got from royalty. She sent a wee letter out and a wee booklet out and to a couple of the royals. And she got a couple of letters back. And this is one of the letters she got back. And I'll just read it out to you. It says, Clarence House, 30th of January, 1989. Dear Mrs. Ponting, but that's a misspelt, it should be Porter. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, has asked me to thank you for your letter and to say how touched Her Majesty was by all your kind remarks. The Queen Mother thought it was very kind of you to send her a copy of Peace at Eventide by Noel Grant, that was the evangelist, and I am to thank you very much. I am also to convey to you Her Majesty's best wishes for the future. Yours sincerely, Elizabeth Bassett, Lady in Waiting. And that says Mrs. Ponting, but it should say Mrs. Porter. And I have that wee letter still in the house. And so that was good. And that's Revornant Mission Hall. And it's near half an hour I've been talking to you, so I better hurry up. Let me see if there's anything else I want to mention. I'll mention this wee book quickly. This is Ryle. J.C. Ryle on holiness. Again, mighty man of God in his day. Mighty man of God. And I'll mention this wee book as well. This is actually a debate. Calvinism. Debating Calvinism by Dave Hunt and James White. 5 points, 2 views. And that was a great book. Of course, James White is a great proponent for Calvinism. And then Dave Hunt was speaking against Calvinism. And it was a great debate. A great lot of stuff in that wee book, and thoroughly enjoyed that book. So I did. Really good. And this here then was my mum's wee Bible. That was my mum's wee SIP Bible. So it was. And there's one more book I'm going to show you, and it's by LaHaye. Tim LaHaye. The Prophecy Man. And it's this book here. This is a great wee book by Tim LaHaye. It's Charting the End Times. And as you know, dispensationalists and premillennialists like to have their charts. And so I'm going to show you this wee book by Tim LaHaye. And there's a wee chart in it. I'm going to show you the chart. There's the chart. That's an amazing chart, isn't it? By LaHaye. Fantastic. Fantastic. And then he's got other stuff in there too with the charts, and there's the signs of Christ's return. So that's a wee book by LaHaye, Charting the End Times. Tim LaHaye. And so thank you for joining me on the Church History Trail. And I trust that you've enjoyed looking at the books, because I certainly enjoy reading them. God bless.